Growing up in the 40s and 50s, there was a small screen and a huge box in our living room, black and white, 3 channels, 3 networks, and it brought the world into our homes in a way we never could have imagined. There was Elvis and Ed Sullivan, there was Lucy, Uncle Milty, Playhouse 90, Studio One, Walter Cronkite, Edward R. Murrow, and I had absolutely no idea that someday I would be part of that magic.
Susan Harris is one of the most unique, prolific, creative TV writers of the golden age of sitcoms. Across the late 70s to the late 90s, Susan Harris's TV shows made a massive cultural impact. And beyond that, she found a way to connect all these shows, from spinoffs to reoccurring actors and reoccurring characters. Susan Harris was the first TV writer, and maybe the last, to find a way to create an expansive universe of characters and actors that all fell under the same umbrella.
In the late 60s, I was very fortunate. My husband left me for another woman. I had a 2-year-old, Sam, no visible means of support, and no marketable skills. And one night I was watching television and I said, maybe I could do that.
Susan Harris entered the industry from a very unconventional place. Not only was this not a time where female writers were staffed on big network sitcoms, she was also a single mother struggling to make ends meet. And so, when she got opportunities, she took those opportunities to show people she had a defined voice and a strong work ethic that could not be denied. She wrote episodes of All in the Family, Love American Style, and various other network sitcoms of the time. But she really made her stand out with an episode of a show called Maude that starred B. Arthur, who would later go on to appear in The Golden Girls. And the topic of that episode was abortion, which was something that was definitely not being covered at the time in mainstream television. And so from the very beginning, Susan Harris didn't just write really funny, great character-driven sitcom episodes. She always addressed social issues and things that were not being said in public and put them right next to the comedy.
The first job was to entertain, and then I was always looking for something more, something to say, to express myself. And comedy is a less threatening way to deliver messages to audiences.
And this eventually brought her the attention of producing team Tony Thomas and Paul Junger-Witt.
I think she had written the Maude abortion episode by the time I had met her, and she had other strings of other episodes that she had written. Along came Bronson's and things and such. But at some point, we realized she's very good, and we can't afford her, so let's make her a partner.
They brought her in to their producing team and decided to form a company together, with her voice as sort of the nucleus for the shows they would go on to create together. The first of these being the groundbreaking comedic satire Soap. Not only did it feature the first gay character on television, played by a then unknown Billy Crystal, it playfully skewered soap opera tropes, everything from inter-family adultery, a horny priest, to an alien possessing one of the family members. Soap ran for 88 episodes, with 72 of them written by Susan Harris by herself, not to mention producing the show. One after another, she pushed the boundaries of what you could do on network TV, with a satirical edge that was decades before its time. And from the success of Soap, they created a spinoff called Benson, starring Robert Guillaume as the same character he had played in Soap, but this time it was a more traditional sitcom. And she continued to push the envelope with race commentary, class commentary, and reoccurring actors from previous shows, as well as discovering new talent who would go on to be famous. Benson ran for 7 seasons and a total of 158 episodes. But her next show, The Golden Girls, would have the biggest cultural impact of all of her shows combined.
Brandon Tartikoff looked at Warren Littlefield and said, "There's a series in women like this." And they said in the room, "How do you feel about writing about older women?" And the writer said, "I don't do older people. I mean, I don't know how to write that," which was fair, and he probably wouldn't have. And we stuck around afterwards and said, "We do, and we know just the writer, Susan."
Thank you for being a friend.
Golden Girls ran for 180 episodes. And even though Susan's contribution was more the pilot and guest writing throughout the seasons, she shaped the tone of the show, which still rings true to audiences today.
It represents a family. And I think very often we find our families outside of our family. And I think that that's its appeal, besides the fact that we had the most extraordinary cast.
Susan would go on to write the most iconic episodes of the show, including Sick and Tired, the 2-part season 5 episode about chronic fatigue syndrome.
We've run every test known to man. They're all normal. You can get dressed, go home, enjoy your life.
But Dr. Stevens, I was always healthy, and then I came down with this flu. I can't get rid of it. I've been sick for 5 months now.
Susan herself had experienced this and was misdiagnosed by numerous doctors, and her frustration with this being something that people didn't take seriously and couldn't understand brought her to write yet another groundbreaking episode of TV.
You know, someday, Dr. Bud, you're going to be on the other side of the table. And as angry as I am, and as angry as I always will be, I still wish you a better doctor than you were to me.
She would later find out it was an adrenal issue, but still, Susan was never afraid to take on something that wasn't being talked about in the mainstream and bring it into one of the most conventional, widespread arenas for discussion, the primetime sitcom. And from Golden Girls, they made a spinoff called Empty Nest, which was about a next-door neighbor character played by Richard Mulligan, who had previously appeared on Soap. And it ran for 170-plus episodes, as well as having its own spinoff, Nurses. And then sometime in the early 90s, they brought back a version of the Golden Girls called Golden Palace. Yet again, featuring actors who had yet to become famous, as well as returning to the original themes that Susan had expertly put together for the Golden Girls. It wasn't a success, but Susan's heart was always in the work.
I'm going to be 85 on my next birthday. I'm now Sophia. Getting old is not the end of life. Getting close to it, but it's not the end. There still are reasons to be alive and to be happy and to be interested and interesting.
Susan Harris's legacy is undeniable. Her impact on American culture in general is so much larger than what most TV writers could imagine it would be. Her name isn't always mentioned in the list of the greatest showrunners of all time or the greatest TV writers of all time, but it does deserve to be there. And as far as the apex of what you can do creatively and artistically in a network sitcom, Susan Harris's multiverse of TV shows capitalized on what the format can offer better than anyone else.